There is a disease no doctor can diagnose. It does not kill your body. It kills every version of you that tried to become something. Every train you boarded and then stepped off before it reached its destination, it is still waiting for you. Engine cold, doors open, going nowhere. Have you ever looked at your own life and realized you have been running from everything, not toward anything? His name did not matter. What mattered was that he could build anything, and he could finish nothing. This is the story of a man who built 1,000 bridges, but never once crossed to the other side. When he was 9, his father gave him a block of clay. He shaped it into a fox, almost finished it, then crushed it in his hands because the ears were not perfect. At 16, he rebuilt a 1,967 motorcycle engine from scrap, every bolt precise, every cylinder clean. He never put the engine back in the bike. At 22, he apprenticed under a master woodworker, built the most beautiful cabinet anyone had seen, then vanished 3 days before applying the final lacquer. People stopped calling him talented. They started calling him something worse, unreliable. And that word, it became a scar he wore on the inside. Then the cracks became canyons. He stopped eating, stopped leaving his workshop, started talking to the things he never finished, as if they could hear him. And then at 3 in the morning, on a Tuesday, he saw the child, standing in the corner of his workshop, wearing his jacket, but 50 sizes too big. The child did not speak. He just held something in his hands, a crushed clay fox, the same one from 20 years ago. The child looked up at him with eyes that said, "What words never could. You left me here. In every single thing you walked away from, you left me behind." The man collapsed, not his body, something deeper, something structural inside him that had been cracking for 20 years finally gave way. When he woke on the workshop floor at dawn, the child was gone, but scratched into the concrete beside his head were coordinates, numbers he did not recognize, a place he had never been. The coordinates led him to the edge of the city, an industrial district, a building that looked like it had survived a war and won. Inside, the sound of hammering, constant, rhythmic, like a heartbeat that refused to stop, and standing at its center, a woman who looked like she had been forged in the same fire as her tools. She did not stop hammering when he entered. She just spoke between strikes. "You are the one who builds coffins for things that are still alive." He asked how she knew about him. She finally stopped, set down her hammer, and pulled a heavy iron drawer open. Inside, a graveyard of her own. "I was worse than you," she said. "I did not just abandon things, I destroyed them, because if they were ruined, I did not have to face the terror of finishing them." "You think leaving something unfinished protects you from judgment," she continued, "but it does the opposite. It judges you every single day, in silence." Then she gave him the first principle. She said, "Go home tonight. Find the oldest thing you abandoned. Not the easiest, the oldest, and put your hands back on it." He went home, dug through boxes he had not opened in years, found the clay, found the memory, found the fear that started everything. His hands remembered the shape. 20 years later, his fingers still knew where the ears were supposed to go. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. He shaped it for 9 hours. His back screamed, his eyes blurred, his hands cramped into claws, but he did not stop, not this time. When it was done, he did not hold it up in triumph. He set it down gently, and he wept, not from sadness, from something he had never felt before, the weight of completion. He brought it to the old woman. She turned it over in her iron-strong hands, examined every surface. Then she set it down and said, "Acceptable. Now, the motorcycle." "The second principle," she said, "inspiration is a liar. It seduces you at the start and abandons you in the middle. Discipline is the only lover who stays. The ones who change the world, she said, are not the ones with the most talent. They are the ones who stayed at the bench when their hands bled and their hearts begged them to stop. So he went into his own furnace. He dragged the motorcycle frame from the corner of his garage, bolted the engine back in. For the first time in 15 years. It took him 3 months. Parts he could not find, bolts that would not thread, wiring that fought him like a living thing. He wanted to quit 11 times. He counted. On the worst night, the shadow child came back. But this time he was not in the corner. He was sitting on the motorcycle. And he was smiling. The day he turned the key and the engine roared to life, it did not sound like a machine. It sounded like something inside him waking up after 15 years of sleep. He rode it to the old woman's forge. She heard him coming from 3 blocks away. When he arrived, she was standing in the doorway, and for the first time, she nodded. "The third principle," she said. "Make one vow at a time. Hold it like iron in the forge. Do not add another until the first has cooled into its final shape." Over the next 2 years, he went back to every abandoned thing. The wooden chair got its 4th leg. The cabinet received its lacquer. The letters were finally sent. He did not become famous. He did not become rich. But every person who received his work received something whole, something finished, something that would last. The last time he dreamed of the shadow child, the boy was no longer flickering. He was solid, real, wearing clothes that fit, and he was building something of his own. Listen to me. You do not need a new beginning. You need an ending. The power you are searching for is not in the next thing. It is in finishing the last thing. So tonight, before you pick up anything new, put your hands back on what you left behind. The half-built thing in your life that haunts you. Go back to it. Finish it. Because you are not broken. You are just unfinished. And unfinished is not the end of the story. It is the middle. And the middle is exactly where you are supposed to fight the hardest.